Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayaha, Sarve Putrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. May all be happy, may all be free from disease, may all realize what is good, may none be subject to misery. Om peace, peace, peace. May we just take a few moments and contemplate on this prayer. Tavakatam ritam tapta jivanam kavipiriditam kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shri Madhatatam Bhuvingaranantiye Bhurida Janaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poet seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears, cleanser of all sins, is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Om peace, peace, peace. Good evening, friends. This evening we will continue with the householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Up to this point we have been talking about Mathur Babu, and we are on part 3 today. The last time we met, we were introduced to Mathur arranging different scholars and pundits to meet with and question Sri Ramakrishna and compare his experiences to those in the scriptures to determine if he was indeed a divine incarnation. Mathur Babu wanted to test Sri Ramakrishna, and each time that he tested him, he would find that his faith would, and in him would just increase. The pundits declared that Sri Ramakrishna was a divine incarnation, but Mathur was still not quite convinced. And so he proposed another test deliberately, and we will start from that just after we met the pundits, and now the next test. We are reading from the book, They Lived with God, which was written by Swami Chaitanananda of our St. Louis Center. So it was probably during this period that Mathur once more tested Sri Ramakrishna to see whether or not he had truly conquered lust. He secretly engaged Lakshmi Bai, a famous courtesan of Calcutta, to tempt Sri Ramakrishna. One day Mathur picked up Sri Ramakrishna and Hridoy in his carriage for what was supposed to be a pleasure trip. Instead, they went to Lakshmi's quarters in Calcutta, and according to plan, Mathur and Hridoy entered a sitting room and sent Sri Ramakrishna, who was unaware of the plot, to Lakshmi's room, where she was waiting to receive him. As soon as the master saw Lakshmi, he addressed her as blissful mother, bowed down to her, and merged into samadhi. Lakshmi had never before seen a person like this. Calling the other women, she said, "Look, this man is free from lust." One of them said, "It seems to me that he is a God-man." Another remarked, "Our profession may be sinful, but what a great good fortune for us that we have seen such a great soul." And still another said, "Sister, what a hell we have invited by trying to tempt this holy man. It is an unpardonable sin." Lakshmi and the other women bowed down to Sri Ramakrishna and took the dust of his feet. Just then Mathur and Hridoy came to the room. The women severely reprimanded Mathur for engaging them to tempt a God-man, an act that could ruin their lives. Sri Ramakrishna gradually returned to the normal plane of consciousness, and Mathur took him back to Dakshineshwar. And Girish Ghosh, he was a playwright. He owned a theater. Many of the actresses in the theater were what we would call prostitutes. But Sri Ramakrishna would often visit to attend plays that he was invited to. And many of the actors and actresses would then give their pranams to Sri Ramakrishna after the performances and ask for his blessing. And even today, or even after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away, in that theater would be a picture of Sri Ramakrishna, and the actors and actresses would salute that in the green room or the preparation room before they would go on stage, because they feel blessed to have met a God-man like that, even though they may have lived, quote, sinful lives outside of the theater. But still, because they played the parts of divine personalities in the plays, whenever Sri Ramakrishna would watch these plays, his remark afterwards would always be something along the line that they are represented the real scene, and so he would see them as the real characters, not the real characters of Chaitanya or Shiva or whatever the play was representing. He would see beyond the personality of the actors and the actresses. And so he would always refer to the actresses refer to them as mother. And here in this case also, even those women that might otherwise tempt other men, he always referred to them as mother, because he felt that he was just the mother's child. So he would automatically mentally revert to that state of mind in their presence. So he could never feel the lust that the average man might feel in their presence. So this only convinced Mathur further that he must be a God-man, because he has conquered lust. The Dakshineshwar temple was, as we have heard in the past, was founded and built by Rani Rasmani, and Mathur was her son-in-law. And he was also the sole executor of that estate after her passing. And one day in the temple, Mathur showed up and he noticed that all the ornaments were stolen from the deity, from the Krishna deity. And when he found out about it, he said, "Oh, what a shame. Who could have saved?" He said, "Oh God, you could have saved your own ornaments, or you couldn't even save your own ornaments." And Sri Ramakrishna, who overheard this, rebuked him and said, the idea that he who is Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune for his handmaid and attendant, could never lack any splendor. Those jewels may be precious to you, but to God they were no better than lumps of clay. So shame on you. You shouldn't have spoken so meanly. So here we have Mathur lamenting over the loss of all these jewels and decorations, all these valuables, but Sri Ramakrishna just reminded him, no, they may be important to you, but in the overall scheme of things, from God's point of view, they were no better than clay. So that's just another example of Sri Ramakrishna's detachment for worldly wealth. But as I mentioned, Mathur is always testing Sri Ramakrishna. So he invited him over to dinner, but he decided that he would set up gold plates, silverware and so forth, and would invited Sri Ramakrishna to eat off these plates. And he also dressed up the master in all kinds of elegant clothing to see what his reaction would be to all these things, to being basically immersed in wealth. And then he said, Father, you are the owner of everything, including the estate. I am nothing but your steward. Look, you have just finished your meal from a gold plate and have drunk from a silver vessel. And then you have left without giving them a backward glance. So Sri Ramakrishna was all well dressed. He had eaten all these things. He just walked away. He didn't even marvel, oh, how beautiful this dinnerware is, or how marvelous these clothes are. He just was there, took them off, and walked away as if they were no different than any other clothes. And then one day, Sri Ramakrishna presented him with a very expensive shawl. Sri Ramakrishna, being childlike, cheerfully accepted it. And he walked around showing it off, just like a little boy might show off his clothing to the other people around him. And then Mathur mentioned what the value of that was, some 1,000 rupees. And then Sri Ramakrishna stopped and he said, what is there in this shawl? Nothing but sheep's wool. Like everything else, it is just a modification of matter. It protects one from the cold, no doubt, but this can be done just as well with a blanket or a quilt. And like other material things, it does not help one to realize God. Rather, it makes the owner assume an air of superiority, and he thinks himself rich and proud. And that takes the man away from God. And this idea was unbearable to Sri Ramakrishna. And once he was filled with that thought, he immediately threw off the shawl, stomped on it, spit on it, and when he got a match, he was about to set it on fire. And then some of the Mathur's attendants grabbed the shawl away and went back to Mathur and described the fate of that shawl to him. And then Mathur just smiled and he said, yes, Father did the right thing. Now, a curious thing, Mathur would refer to Ramakrishna as father. However, Mathur was about 17 years older than Sri Ramakrishna. So I'm not quite sure what how that happens in Indian culture. Maybe someone can explain that in the comments or perhaps in the audience afterwards. And as I mentioned before, Mathur was the son-in-law of Rani Rasmani, and she trusted him completely and felt he was fully capable of managing the affairs of the Dakineshar and all the other properties that she owned. So another incident happened that further increased Mathur's faith in Sri Ramakrishna. Just to note, Mathur Babu had a second wife. His first wife also was a daughter of Rani Rasmani. She passed away soon after they were married. And knowing that Mathur could manage her estate, she suggested that he marry one of her other daughters. Her name we'll get to it. Jagadamba. So she came down with a severe case of dysentery, and the doctors tried their utmost to cure her and finally declared that she was uncurable. Mathur was panic-stricken, and he knew that if his wife died, he would lose control over the management of Dakineshar and the rest of her estate. So he desperately rushes to Sri Ramakrishna and, weeping, said, "Father, not only am I threatened with a terrible personal loss, but if the management of the estate passes into other hands, I shall be unable to continue my services to you." Seeing Mathur's agony, Sri Ramakrishna's mind was filled with compassion, and he said in an ecstatic mood, "Don't be afraid, your wife will recover." These words greatly assured Mathur. He returned home and found that Jagadamba's illness was taking a dramatic turn for the better. Referring to this incident later, Sri Ramakrishna said, "From that day, Jagadamba slowly started to recover, and the disease was transferred to this body," meaning himself. "As a result of this cure, I suffered for 6 months from dysentery and other complaints." So these great souls, out of compassion, they can take on the sins and the sufferings of those that they try to help, because the karma that was incurred cannot be stopped. Just as an example, if you shoot an arrow, it has to land on a target. And the severity of the impact can be subdued by spiritual practice, or can be one's guru can also help reduce the effects of that karma. But somehow that karma has to be worked out, and Sri Ramakrishna took on that responsibility, and as a result, he suffered from the illnesses that he removed from Jagadamba. And whenever Mathur was in trouble, he would always go to Sri Ramakrishna, because he had faith that, well, he can somehow manage to take care of my difficulties. So he once ordered his guards to take part in a brutal gang fight with the guards of another landowner. And news reached him that one of the guards had been killed. Now, Mathur probably sent his gang there out of some kind of sense of, may not have been of clear thinking, but he sent them there, and he realized that he might end up being prosecuted. So he goes to Sri Ramakrishna and pleads with the master to save him. Sri Ramakrishna rebuked him and saying, "Rascal, you will create a row every day and come and cry, 'Save me.' What can I do?" And he told him, "Go and suffer the consequences." But at last, seeing Mathur's deep anguish, the master said, "Well, it will be as Mother wills." Well, Mathur escaped arrest. And another time, Mathur was involved in a lawsuit, and he asked Sri Ramakrishna to offer a flower to the Divine Mother for him, but without telling the master what his intentions were. He firmly believed that he would receive the Mother's blessing through Sri Ramakrishna. But at that time, the master offered the flower unexpectedly or unsuspectingly, and Mathur won the case. Now, because Mathur was so closely involved in Sri Ramakrishna, checking on him every day or sending some of his attendants to go check on Ramakrishna to see if all his needs were met, or just to report what he was doing. He often had the opportunity of seeing Sri Ramakrishna in states of samadhi. And he became curious to know more about this mysterious phenomena. And he knew very well that the master had the ability to transmit samadhi to others. So he begged Sri Ramakrishna to give him that experience. And at first, Sri Ramakrishna tried to dissuade him from that desire, but after repeated requests, he finally said, "Well, I'll ask the Mother about it. She will do as she thinks best," he says. Well, a few days later, while at home in Calcutta, Mathur experienced Bhava Samadhi. That's a state of mind that's somewhat in between the absolute plane and then the relative plane. So Sri Ramakrishna describes what happened, and then he says, "Mathur sent for me, and when I went there, I found him altogether changed. He wasn't the same man. Whenever he spoke of God, he shed floods of tears. His eyes were red with weeping, and his heart was pounding. And when he saw me, he fell down and clasped my feet. 'Father,' he said, 'I admit it, I'm beaten. I've been in this state for the past 3 days. I can't apply my mind to worldly affairs, however hard I try. Everything is going wrong. Please take back the ecstasy you gave me. I don't want it.' 'But you begged me for the ecstasy.' He said, 'I know I did, and it is indeed a blissful state, but what's the use of bliss when all my worldly affairs are going to pieces? This ecstasy is yours. Father, it only suits you. The rest of us don't really want it. Please take it back.' Then I laughed and just rubbed Mathur's chest, and with my hand, and he was himself again. So here we are living in the world. We are coming here, we hear about all these experiences, and we think, or we imagine, or we fantasize that, wow, I would like to have that experience. But in reality, this is an example of what would happen to someone that hasn't actually fully worked toward having that experience, and just gets it all of a sudden. One has to kind of it's just like when you go to the gym, You kind of have to go through the whole training process, make your body strong, control the mind, pursue the disciplines. Otherwise, you won't be fit to enter the Olympics or any other endeavor that would be very taxing on the body and on the mind. So going in to try to beg for that kind of experience and not be really prepared, you will end up rejecting the experience, as Mathur has here. So if we really want that experience, we have to put in the work and the effort. Now, Mathur had a family priest who was watching all of this, and he was very jealous of Sri Ramakrishna. And when Mathur wasn't around, he grabbed Sri Ramakrishna and asked him, "What is your secret? What power are you holding over Mathur?" And one evening, he found Sri Ramakrishna lying in a state of ecstasy in Mathur's residence. No one else was in the room, and the priest's name was Chandra. And he was shaking the master several times and he said, "Tell me how you are capturing him. Don't pretend that you can't talk. How did you hypnotize him?" But the master couldn't speak because his mind was in some spiritual state and not conscious of the physical plane. But his non-responsiveness made the priest really angry. And so he said, "So you won't tell me, you scoundrel?" And he kicked him many times. And then he left the room in disgust. Well, the next morning, Sri Ramakrishna didn't say anything about the matter to Mathur, but at that time, but later the priest was dismissed for some other behavior. And then one day in the course of conversation, Sri Ramakrishna told Mathur what Chandra had done to him. And Mathur became furious and he said, "Had I been told that then, he would have been killed." So one must start thinking, what power did Mathur really have? He sounded like a mafia boss here. That one would be very frightened to slight him. And yet here he was to protect Sri Ramakrishna. And so makes one wonder, this was Sri Ramakrishna's bodyguard. Now, Mathur, he would spend freely and lavishly on Sri Ramakrishna, but he's also somewhat miserly. And so he would often plan some great pilgrimage, and he would arrange a party. He would get together. He would basically get assigned to him. Several railroad cars would be reserved, and he would make arrangements with the railroad company to bring these cars to certain sites, and then basically park them while they go and do their thing. Then they come back, and then the train would pick them up and take them to another pilgrimage spot. And so on one of these trips, he ended up going to a place called Deogar, which has a famous Shiva shrine. And then when Sri Ramakrishna got there and saw what the area was like, he was overcome with compassion at the condition of the people in the nearby village. And he begged Mathur, he said, "You are the steward of the mother's estate. Give these people one piece of cloth and one good meal each, and also some oil for their heads." But Mathur was reluctant. He said, "Father, this pilgrimage is going to cost a great deal, and there are so many people here. If I give them what you ask, I may find myself short of money later." Sri Ramakrishna cried bitterly. He said, "You wretch, I'm not going to Varanasi. I'm staying here with these people." They have no one to care for them, and I won't leave them. Mathur, of course, yielded, and he had cloth sent from Calcutta and fulfilled all the master's other requests. And then only then could they continue to Varanasi. It also happened again on a boat trip along the Ganges when Mathur wanted to visit one of the estates and check on its condition. And again, Sri Ramakrishna was overwhelmed with grief when he saw the miserable condition of the villagers, and he asked Mathur to feed and clothe them. And again, Mathur was reluctant. But later on, he carried out the master's wishes. Now, Mathur had basically been with Sri Ramakrishna for about 14 years. And with being around him, he also was transformed from, as I described, he was very attached to the world. He was also somewhat miserly, but freely wanted to show off his wealth. But his love and deep regard for Sri Ramakrishna gradually brought his mind to a higher state. Now, Mathur, because he was also older, he was also getting more illnesses, and we're approaching how he approached death. Now, he was bedridden for a long time, and he desperately wanted to see the master, but Sri Ramakrishna would not come. The master told Mathur's messengers that he had no power to cure the abscess, so his visit would be to no avail. And at last, after repeated requests from Mathur, he finally came. And when Mathur saw him, he said, "Father, give me a little dust of your feet." Sri Ramakrishna said, "What good will it do? Will it cure your abscess?" And then Mathur said, "Father, am I so mean? Do you think I want the dust of your feet to cure my abscess? I have doctors here for that purpose. I want the dust of your feet in order to cross this ocean of Maya." Hearing this, Sri Ramakrishna merged into samadhi. Mathur then put his head on the feet of the master and received his blessing. And fortunately, he recovered a short time later. And while in an ecstatic mood, Sri Ramakrishna said to Mathur, "As long as you are alive, I shall be at Dakineshwar." Mathur was startled to hear that because he knew it was the Divine Mother herself who was protecting not only him, but his family also. He humbly said, "Why do you say so, Father? My wife and son Dwarka are also very much devoted to you." "All right," said the master, "I shall remain as long as your wife and Dwarka are alive." And as a matter of fact, they had all passed away by the time Sri Ramakrishna left Dakineshwar in 1885. In July of 1871, Mathur passed away of typhoid fever after a short period of time, but Sri Ramakrishna did not go to see him while he was ill. He would send Hridoy to check on him and report to him. So one day, Mathur was taken to Kalighat, which is a holy place in South Calcutta. Meanwhile, Sri Ramakrishna was absorbed in samadhi in his room for a couple of hours while his spirit went forth to help Mathur attain that goal. to go across the ocean of Maya. And at 5 p.m., Sri Ramakrishna came out of Samadhi and said to Hridoy, "The companions of the Divine Mother took Mathur with love and care into their celestial chariot, and his soul has ascended to the sphere of the Mother." Later that night, the news reached Dakshineshwar that Mathur had indeed passed away at 5 p.m. Mathur's service to the Master is now legendary. In later years, Sri Ramakrishna never tired of telling devotees about him. Once, one of the devotees asked the Master, "Sir, what became of Mathur after death? Surely he wouldn't have to be born again, would he?" The Master replied, "Perhaps he has been born as a king somewhere. He still had the desire for enjoyment." And then he changed the subject. After all of Mathur's testing, he became convinced of Sri Ramakrishna's divine nature, and finally said to him, "Father, there is nothing inside you but God." So we can say that Mathur tested Sri Ramakrishna on our behalf to remove any doubt that we may have about Sri Ramakrishna's divine nature. And we should be indebted to him and we don't know who Sri Ramakrishna picks to be his instruments, and it is indeed a wonder and that is what we shall discover as we get to know the other direct disciples or the other householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So thank you all very much for coming today, for those in person and also for those that are attending online. And I will just close with a couple of announcements. Next Sunday, Swami Brahmatmananda, who takes care of our retreat property, will be here in Seattle to give a talk on why we suffer. That will be at 10 a.m. this Sunday morning. This Monday, Swami Satyamananda was originally scheduled to return, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, his flight will be rescheduled. We don't have that information yet. So this coming week, I will be giving the gospel class on Wednesday at 7 p.m. and also the next Friday class at 7 p.m. And I will introduce you to Hridoy, who was Sri Ramakrishna's nephew. He was the caregiver of Sri Ramakrishna during the parts of his life when he was doing his spiritual practices. And he was also a real character involved in a lot of drama in Sri Ramakrishna's life. And I will introduce you to him next Friday. So I will conclude with a chant. Niranjanam nityam anantarupam bhaktanukampa tragrigraham vaye Ishavataram paramesamidyam tvam Ramakrishnam shirasa namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.